Josh here. So you were finally able to convince your local game store to let you host a Sorcery tournament event. Now what? Well, many of you may be thinking, well, you need to go post it on the Play Network. And while that's true, there's actually something before that step. And that is to establish event guidelines. Now, some of you may be thinking, whoa, event guidelines? It's just going to be me and my local friends. There's not going to be any issues. There's not going to be any problems. Well, maybe, but if the rules aren't clear, what if there are? In addition, you're going to put this out on the Sorcery Play Network. There are many individuals in the Sorcery community that are happy to drive to events. And it could be that all of a sudden, on event day, a couple of people show up that you don't know. You didn't even know they were around. And they tell you, well, we drove 100 miles to come to your event. And now all of a sudden, oh no, what about our rules? Are they going to be okay with how we play Sorcery? And that is why you need to establish a very basic outline of your event guidelines. Now, there are many parts to this, but the most important parts are what I am going to cover. First off, you need to list the rule resources that your event will be using and their order of precedence. For Sorcery, this should typically be Curiosa.io and the facts for individual cards as the top priority, followed by the codex. Those two rule resources should be the primary documents that determine how judge calls are made at your event. That is my recommendation. Make sure that that is spelled out. In addition to that, you then want to very, very clearly list any idiosyncrasies for your event. For example, if your local play group has banned a particular card, or perhaps has maybe created some type of your own local errata for a card, the most common of which might be saying, okay, this exceptional is going to be treated as a unique. Those types of things need to be spelled out in your event guidelines. And those especially need to actually be spelled out in your event listing on the Sorcery Play Network, just in case other players show up to play at your event. They need to be able to be aware that, oh, this particular card is banned. This particular card, instead of using my regular 3, I can only use 1. That is why you need to have those things spelled out. Now, in addition to that, there are a couple other very important things to decide. First off, there is the whole procedure of how long is the round going to last. Are you going to use 45-minute rounds, which is the standard? Perhaps your play group plays a little bit slower, so you've decided to use 1-hour rounds. Those types of things need to be spelled out. In addition, what happens at the end of time? You need to decide, is there going to be any extra rounds of play? Or are you just going to say, okay, at the end, we go straight to tie breaks? Many events will actually give some additional rounds of play after the time limit is up. And then you go to tie breaks. So you need to make that decision. And then there's the big issue of tie breaks. Tie breaks have gone through a lot of changes in Sorcery. And a lot of players are not happy with the tie breaks that they've used or seen. Lots of issues there. So you may have your own local tie-breaking system that you need to lay out. One of the more popular tie-breaking systems right now involves, if the event, whether it's you had a few extra rounds or just at the end of time, if one player is on death's door, then the other player wins. The next tie break is a double loss. That's how short your tie breaks can be. They could be much more involved though. I have seen systems that have 5 levels of tiebreak. Although there are lots of arguments that some of those give advantages to particular deck types and particular types of play. So you need to decide what you want your tie breaks to be at your event, and those need to be spelled out as well. Finally, one of the other big things that you want to make sure is spelled out in your tournament or your event guidelines are how are you going to handle takebacks. This is a big one. Typically, in many of the sorcery events I've been involved in, the concept of no new information is what is applied for the purpose of a takeback. For example, I play Common Sense. And then you have seen Common Sense, and I'm like, I'm not going to play that. I changed my mind. I didn't search my deck. Nothing happened. I didn't do any of that. I simply picked the card back up and return it. There's no new information gained. Right? I did not search my deck. Now, you can say, well, the opponent gained some information. That's true, but that is to the other player's detriment, right? So that playback would typically, or that take back would be allowed for typical play. Now, if on the other hand, I'd played Common Sense, I searched my deck, I picked out a card, there's no going back from that. You have looked through your whole deck. So, no, it's not happening. So those are the types of things that you need to think about and line out. Those need to be in your event guidelines. Now you may be saying, boy, this is a lot. This is a lot more than I expected. And it is. But because you do not know definitively who is going to be at your events, you want to make sure you have these things in place so that everyone knows what's going to happen. That is the most important thing. And now I'm going to let you know how you can kind of cheat this. Typically at these major events, there will be an event guideline document released. Now, these are going to be very significant because they're typically for major events. But you can pull one of those down, chop out all the extra stuff that you don't need. All the stuff that's specific to that event or something like that, or just doesn't, like you have a constructed event and there's a whole section on draft. Well, you don't need that. You cut that out. Tailor that and use those event guidelines that have been created by someone else in the community. You may have to tweak some of it. You know, there may be a section that says no bans and you're like, oh no, we're banning some stuff. And you need to tweak that section. But you can pull that whole document from a major event and use it as a guideline to create your own event guidelines. And that way, the process is much more simple for you. And it may also make you consider, oh, I didn't think about that. Boy, I really should leave this section or maybe tweak some part of this section and leave that section in, because that makes sense to actually have that as an event guideline for my event. And the larger your events grow, the more important it will be to have a firm set of event guidelines. So, you've got your sorcery event. Now, before you hop on the Play Network and post that event, because you need to list your ban list and your errata or anything else you're going to drop in there, any other details from the event guidelines that are really, really pertinent. Maybe you've decided you're going to do deck registration, something like that. Tell people how to get there. And in my opinion, you should put the event guidelines into your actual Sorcery Network event so people can link right to it and see those. But highlight the big ones in the Sorcery Network, like the bans. Those are very important for people to be aware of and can determine if someone actually wants to come to an event. If they look at your guidelines and say, this event is not for me, then everyone is happy, right? They don't make the long trip to your event, and then, you end up with someone coming to your event without that expectation, and then there's a hubbub at your event. Everyone's happy because none of that happened, because the event guidelines clearly listed all of that and spelled it out. That's it for this installment of the Craft of Judging series. I hope you enjoyed this installment, and if you have any suggestions for future entries, please let me know in the comments below. As always, keep on contesting the realm!